The Humans, from Earth, Sol System, and a half-dozen others, is a burgeoning member of the galactic hegemony. They are known for their warlike tendencies, oddly honorable cultural archetypes, and general unpredictability as a whole. Their ways of battle and war are terrible, it is well known, but there is a lesson to be learned from studying them in historical accounts to better understand the species for the betterment of all concerned in any and all future member species interactions. Case study: the war crimes in the conflict with the Thrad. The Thrad were a brutish, bullying, savage race that only respected might and conflict. Their homeworld was repeatedly nuked to the Stone Age several times in their early development, only to reform as new cultures over and over again, rising briskly back up in technology on the backs of remnant industrial infrastructures and machinery. By the penultimate version of Thrad culture, they achieved spaceworthiness and immediately went out looking for weaker species to make war upon. They found and chose the humans. The Thrad leadership openly mocked the humans' way of war. Why, look at their soldier weaponry. Pathetic. Simple lead projectiles. Why a soldier could be hit with 3 to 4 to even 9 of those and still survive. Sure, they do the damage to end conflict, but no permanent maiming, no assurance of cruel death. We just don't understand. We know from their other technology they are clearly capable of so much better. Oh, and the medevacs? That red plus symbol on a white field? For some reason that is off limits to shooting when on a ship, a vehicle, or a certain soldier's helmet. And the medics are even known to give aid to the opposing forces when they call for aid in battle. And they bury the enemy dead with honors? What madness is this? Oh, and don't get me started on the accept surrender when it is offered thing. They just stop fighting, disarm them, and take them away to be well treated, just confined but fed, housed, and, not tortured for information or just for fun. Hoo-hoo! Har! This is some easy pickings, boys. Let's get to work. On conflict zones, the Thrad exploited these perceived weaknesses. The specifically targeted medevac soldiers and equipment, ships, and landers. They were often high-visibility white and were easily picked off. They prided themselves on using the red plus as a targeting mark. When human soldiers were surrounded and surrendered, they were ruthlessly gunned down. Their bodies maimed and used as trophies, strung up on spikes on Thrad vehicles and dropships. This went on for a while, the Thrad reveling in their utter superiority over the humans and their silly way of making war. Then the missive was transmitted. At the time, the galaxy took minimal notice, but that soon changed. Leaders of the Thrad, we, the humans of Earth, find you guilty of war crimes in action against our people. From this time forward, you are no longer afforded the privileges of the Geneva Convention humanitarian rights as combat participants. I have authorized our generals to enact total war ordinance, to commence immediately. The Thrad were just as confused by all of this as the rest of the galaxy was. What did any of this mean? War crime? But it was war. How could there even be a crime in such a thing? And what was this Geneva thing? Nobody knew at the time. The Thrad warlord, in his forward base of operations on Earth Kentucky territory, scratched his head in confusion while reading the missive. "Warlord!" a comm soldier called out in alarm. "We are receiving reports of Thrad soldiers are dying by the thousands." The general's blood surged in excitement. "Show me!" On a vid screen in his command tent, aerial images from spy drones captured an engagement. The humans rushed down a dropship ramp, wielding blocky firearms on unknown design. They fanned out and just started indiscriminately opening fire on the Thrad positions. The new rifles barked a loud staccato, and the Thrad emplacements simply detonated in clouds of smoke, debris, and blood. As the smoke cleared, craters the size and depth that a fist could fit into were seen peppering the concrete slabs. "Wah! These things are awesome!" "Hey, what Dorkzilla nicknamed these things?" "Bolters?" Good enough for me, one of the soldiers said while slapping a new magazine in. Similar indiscriminate horror was unleashed on any Thrad encounter, on any shipboarding, on any raid. These bolters were truly nasty pieces of work. Burst or full auto only, .75 caliber grenade launchers that detonated on impact with a solid target, or on a micro delay when encountering a fleshy target. The result? Utter mayhem and destruction. Actually too much destruction. Fragging around blind corners and recon by fire cover positions was horribly effective with these new weapons. It was rather unreal. The fact that these bolters were kept unused in normal conflict is important to note. The warlord was excited at first. Finally, these humans putting up a fight. But then more reports came in that quieted his excitement. There were other, more horrific details being reported. Spy drones overflew quiet zones, where known Thrad positions were entrenched. The view was stunning and appalling. The place was quiet because everyone was dead. Not just dead, melted. Vaguely soldier-shaped piles of body armor, seeping with a gray slime, dripping off of Thrad bones. All the war gear and machinery was similarly degraded. Metal slabs pitted and flaking, rubber hoses and seals rotting and splitting, sending fuel and coolant spraying into the sky. What madness is this? Reports from the space fleet. Human-launched what amounted to boarding torpedoes. Penetrating all enemy hulls, the soldiers emerged and just began shredding the bulkheads and airlock doors with bolter fire, then lobbed in 2 gas grenades before quickly falling back to the boarding craft to disengage. Onboard camera feeds showed fleet crewmen screaming, writhing in agony around the bridge, tearing at their eyes before falling to the floor, dead. Within an hour, the entire crew were similar gray slimes dripping from bones. FTL reports came in from the Thrad homeworld. Odd meteor strikes, that airburst in upper atmosphere, releasing a strange cloud in the bursts. Homeworld News Report started broadcasting cities suddenly going silent, the news reporters twitching and scratching their arms and necks. The Thrad warlord had just about enough time to get a big picture of what was going on. "We are being exterminated!" when he heard the mortar thumps from the surrounding wooded ridges. Mortar shells arced into his camp, detonating in the air with a thwump cloud of noxious gas. The warlord's tent started to dissolve, falling away in tatters. He quickly put on his chemical warfare mask. This was some sort of chemical acid or some... The filters of his gas mask failed. Then the rubber face seal was felt to break seal against his face, and microfractures were tracing thin lines across his ceramic glass face shield. The warlord's eyes widened in horror when his skin started to itch, then burn, then eating deep to his core like shredder drill bit. He could feel it crawling through his veins to every part of his body. The eyes were the first to go. They poured out of his face into puddles of gray slime. He curled on the floor in agony, never knowing what hit him. He, and every Thrad warrior in known space, was quickly and mysteriously dead. The conflict was over within a week. A common thing with humans, properly pissed off. See Dragon Cat Extinction. The current culture iteration of the Thrad is one of abject terror, where every creak of machinery and every itch is the worst nightmare to that utterly broken people. The galactic community took note. All members quietly and politely asked for and received a copy of the Geneva Convention, Humanitarian Laws of Armed Conflicts. All immediately signed into the Geneva Convention in its entire whole and notified all of their military doctrines to adopt them as, all in all, they were a remarkably honorable practice, especially when held true to firmly in actual war. Later, quiet inquiries were made about the terrible Total War Ordinance. The bolter was understood well enough, but the chemical gas attacks remained a mystery. The information was given, with solemn assurances that they were put away to never be used again in normal conflict. They were microbial life. natural organisms living in the Earth biosphere, slightly tweaked to specialize in certain areas. There were two microbes that were weaponized for just in case: Shredder and Xenophage. Shredder was a silicate diatom, very common in Earth's oceans, but this one was special. Instead of making its cellular crystals out of silica ... it was trained to use rubber and other long-chain polymers commonly found in industrial products. Shredder was originally intended as a waste recycling breakdown treatment to aid in industrial waste disposal and oil spills, but it was found to be far too virulent, its pre-production rate accelerated by the materials it learned to consume. As it started to seep out of recycling pits and into the factory above it, it was quickly contained at great cost. So it was a failed recycling project, immediately recognized for its weaponizing potential by DARPA, who quickly seized all patents and control over the microorganism centuries ago. Xenophage was far more horrifying. It was purely natural, no genetic tinkering required. It was a natural immune response against alien life intrusion of the Earth biome itself. The microbe was similar to the macrophage in human immune system, but was free-roaming and airborne. It simply roamed, and when it bumped into another organism, it smelled it. Chemical sampling checked for Earth-specific isotope ratios and protein genomes. If it was earthy smell, it wandered on in peace. But if it ever smelled a non-earthy smell, it ate it and used its energy to multiply. Scientists discovered this immune response of the Earth biosphere was evolved due to panspermia contagions falling to Earth on micrometeorites all throughout its evolutional history. To weaponize it was only about getting it to locations in sufficient concentrations. Xenophage was a horror show revealed to the galactic community. The Earth itself had an immune response that the humans learned about and immediately asked question number 2 about it. Okay, but can it be weaponized? But there was a far more horrible realization that came from learning from the Thrad conflict. That is that the humans are indeed a terribly warlike species. But the important thing to realize is, when they wage war, they are always holding back. By ethical humanitarian choice. See, I told you humans were oddly honorable all in all. So, do your expectations feel subverted?